Welcome to everyone who's joining. We're going to give folks one more minute to join and get in the room and make sure their audio is set up. But thank you so much for being on time this morning or afternoon, and we'll start soon.
Thanks everyone for joining. Welcome. My name is Christabel Netondo. As we wait for the rest to join, maybe on the chat, you can just drop your name, your role, your organization, and the expectations for this session today. So welcome to the Youth Engagement Community of Practice. This is our first event of the year, and we're so excited to have you all join us today. I can see we are introducing ourselves on the chat. Happy to have you all. So I will introduce myself. My name is Christabel Netondo. I am the youth advisor for the Youth Engagement Community of Practice. With me, I have my co-champion who will give her an opportunity to introduce herself as well. Welcome, Farida.
Thank you, Christabel. So thank you everybody for joining us. I'm Farida Makame. I'm a Community of Practice champion. So I also worked in programming, and I currently write lots of proposals for young people. So I'm really interested and happy to learn from everybody, and also excited about this framework.
All right, thanks, Farida. Next slide, please. So a bit, as we settle in, a bit of housekeeping for today. You're allowed to mute yourself so that we can minimize on the distractions and the noise. But should you have anything to say, definitely we'll unmute you and share. Also keep your cameras off to save on bandwidth. And then you can raise your hand if you have something to respond, and we will be in touch. And then also to notify you that the meeting is being recorded so that we can share the recordings back to you after the session via youthpower.org. And then you can also use the chat to answer or to ask any questions that you may want to connect, and then to also bring in clarity on the topic of discussion for the day. And then you can also turn on the closed captioning at the bottom of your screen. And yeah, welcome everyone. So next slide, please. So welcome again. So about the Youth Engagement Community of Practice, we are a community of young change makers, a community of youth programmers, youth funders, youth implementers, and youth researchers who are working to advance best practices when it comes to positive youth development and youth engagement in all aspects of our programming. And for us this year at the Youth Engagement Community of Practice, we hope to promote positive youth development approach to advance outcomes in youth programming through creating a member-led collaborative space. As we are engaged today, we are hoping that we can have this space. We're hoping that we can have this space to share ideas and resources about youth engagement and to discuss together. Also, we are hoping to lean on peer-to-peer experiences to share best practices of existing resources cut across the various roles that we play when it comes to positive youth development. And then about our COP is that we nurture a member-led technical network within the community to offer practical tips to challenges faced by members. This could be through the focus group discussions on a particular topic within the youth engagement. So welcome to those who are new to us. This is what we do at the Youth Engagement Community of Practice. Next slide, please. So asking yourself why we are here today. The poster was out there. Join us so that you can learn how to adapt the global lead framework. So today we are hoping to learn about the components that build up to the global lead framework, which we'll discuss later on. And then you're also hoping to learn on how we can apply the global lead framework, specifically in designing youth programs. And then you're also hoping that by the end of the session, you as a youth programmer, as a young change maker or a researcher or implementer, you can be able to then identify what role can you play to adapt this framework within your own program. Next slide, please. So the first part, you're going to look at what the Global Lead Toolkit and Framework is all about. And how the session is structured is that we have three parts of the session, talking about the Global Lead Toolkit itself, talking about the framework, and then lastly, getting into the breakout room with our speakers to discuss how you can adapt the framework into your programming. But first, I'll share about the global lead. So the Global Leadership and Education Advancing Development, which is abbreviated to the Global Lead. This is a USAID initiative where it aims at enabling youth as partners in development in order to meet the Sustainable Development Goals through enhanced education, civil or political engagement, and leadership opportunities across various sectors within the youth programming. Next slide, please. So the Global Lead is a toolkit in itself, and by toolkit, it means that it has consolidated resources, templates, useful reports that can help you in utilizing it within your program, either to design or to implement. And then it also, as a toolkit, it collaboratively targets not only the USAID staff, but also young change makers and implementers when it comes to measuring project performance, designing new programs, and even evaluating and coordinating communications within youth development programs. So how this Global Lead Toolkit was developed, it was underpinned by a framework, which I'm going to hope that my colleague Farida will guide us through on how the framework came about. But on the chart, I'd like Stephanie to share with us a poll on, have you ever used the positive youth development approach in your programming? As a program implementer, have you used the positive youth development approach in your work? So maybe a minute or two. There are a couple of yeses, no. If you're not sure about what the positive youth development approach is, it's also good to share you're not sure. And Farida will say a bit about it. All right. 22 of 37. All right. Couple more seconds. Have you used a positive youth development approach in your work as a researcher, implementer, funder? Yeah, a couple of people have used this approach. All right. I'm going to end the poll and then hand it over to Farida, who will take us through what the Global Lead Framework is all about and how it was able to build up on the positive youth development framework. Over to you, Farida.
Thanks. Thank you, Christabel. If you get to the next slide. So the Global Lead Framework, if we can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So the Global Lead Framework, I do a lot of proposal writing and designing, and what I really like about it is that it has brought at least a lot of the knowledge we know about youth programming into one easy to see and visually appealing way of presentation. So what we really like is the fact that it kind of helps you to identify the main or the most important outcomes for youth development. You can see on the pie on the leftmost side written as outcomes, and it looks at these outcomes as progressive attainment for young people, which is really nice. And the language that has been used in the outcomes is very similar to some of the engagement models we know of, including the positive youth development, if others have heard of the Hearts Ladder and things like that. And this is reflected towards the middle pie that looks at young people, progressing from being educated, so being aware about different issues, and then trying to exercise that knowledge and their agency by participating in civic and political engagements, then going even further from moving from just participating towards now leading initiatives that can bring transformative change in their communities, and then finally looking at how do they organize, how do they create bigger scale or bigger impact through working together. So it really transitions the young people's experience from just having knowledge towards exercising that knowledge and then acting on it, and then finally collective action, which is really building the agency in a nice way. And what is really nice about this representation is that it helps you plan in terms of what interventions can I do to help young people learn about this subject area? What can I do to help them, put that knowledge into practice? And then how do I know that they're exercising leadership? What are some of the ways I can encourage that? So you keep on thinking about the different levels, and then you also think about what the levels means in terms of outcomes, which is really, really nice. So I didn't develop this tool, but when I looked at it with my experience, I really liked it. And what is also good about it is the fact that it kind of tells you in terms of transformative change, how are you heading? It says, for example, if you look at the bottom, at this stage, maybe when you're in the very early stages of the outcome, you're doing mainly development, and then you're moving towards advancing collective actions. And finally, by doing youth organizing, we're hoping to create systemic change. So in brief, that's my reflections about this tool. And from what I know about youth engagement, we really like it. I like it. So we're gonna hear from other colleagues, the two young people we invited today, to share what they think. What is their reaction to this? Thank you. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to introduce the young people we have today. So we're going to have Maria Malomalo. She's the founder and director of Mwana Pwo in Angola. She's an Pan-African feminist. She's very passionate about adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. And she's, of course, done a lot of work around this, including some advocacy work, including working with young women and young girls to generate evidence for advocacy, addressing sexual exploitation in mining industry, child marriage, and HIV. So really an activist in her own way. And then also have the next slide, we have another young person, Oscar Kimaro. He's from Tanzania. He currently works for Save the Children, but has a long history working with young people in advocacy issues over 8 years. He's been designing different programs specifically around advocacy. One of his most famous campaigns is the Stand with Eva campaign. If you've ever heard about it, is when we had a case here in Tanzania where a young girl, Eva, she wrote a letter, and this was read by President Obama in the UN General Assembly. And she's also done a couple of campaigns around ending child marriage. So he's really passionate about advocacy. And now, after giving a brief introduction, maybe I can give them a few minutes to put on their camera to say hi to this group before I give the next steps.
Hello, everyone. Like Farida said, my name is Maria Malomalo. I am based in Angola, and I work around adolescent sexual and reproductive health and rights. I look forward to this wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Oscar Kimaro. I've been introduced by Farida, and I've been working a lot on issues of civic engagement for young people and designing programs, and I'm really looking forward to have this discussion together. Thank you.
Thank you. If we can go to the next slide. So the format today, we're going to have two breakouts. One is going to be led by Maria, and the other one is going to be led by Oscar. When we presented this framework to Oscar and Maria, we asked them to think about 3 different questions which guided their presentation. And the questions were, how does youth leadership show up in your work? How can the framework be adapted for program design and implementation? How can this framework help to engage youth and stakeholders, especially in health and advocacy, which is the thematic area they work in? So we're going to present now the format. How are we going to coordinate the breakouts? So we're going to have 2 rooms. Room 1 is going to be led by Maria, and it's going to be focused on sexual reproductive health and rights. Room 2 is going to be with Oscar, and it's going to be focused on policy and advocacy. We hope to have 20 minutes in the breakout. They'll do 10 minutes presentations. We'll have 15 minutes to discuss. And then once that's done, we'll come back to the plenary and move ahead with the next steps. So we have some instructions on how we're going to go about that. So if you're using your web browser, you'll scroll down to these 4 boxes, breakout rooms, then you'll select the one that you want to join, whether it's room 1 or room 2. And there's another option of if you're dialing in, and that will be for you to type in, your preferred room, health, room 1, and room 2 is policy and advocacy. And if you're having troubles, you can you can write in the chat and the co-host will help to assign you. Back to Katie.
Yeah, I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Sure. So I take this opportunity to really welcome you to this room. Hopefully, most of you have joined already, and I'm looking forward to discussing with you and share what I have and probably learn from you as well, because I completely believe you've already seen the framework, you have your own reflection. So my reflection is also based on the same understanding, but also based on the experience that I've had of working closely to a similar project, which then has a lot of these components, and that is not other than Kijana Wajibika project, which was implemented in Tanzania, and mainly driving young people into the accountability agenda, where they had opportunities to really come up with issues that they face, the challenges that they face, go into the field, do a lot of data collection, and then come back to the decision makers sitting on the table, discussing and presenting some of these kind of things, and then have a sort of deliberate actions into the conversation and see how the possibility of forward and take some of the actions into measuring those. So that is one, but again, I've been involved in designing a lot of other programs which are youth-led or youth-focused. And as a young person myself, I've been growing in this field where now I'm also part of, a member of the organization, which is now working on various other issues, but also a leader within that organization because I'm a manager, so I am also responsible in making some of the decisions. So I'm a typical example of how a framework like this can also result into someone who can also play a great role in organizing other youth and ensure that we are effectively and meaningfully in delivering programs, but also talking to matters that are relevant to us. So, so as you can see the photo, this is when I was also doing, implementing this project, and therefore looking forward into seeing how we are able to share some of the lessons. So I just decided to start with asking ourselves, like, why are we talking about this framework now? Why do we think youth-focused and youth-integrated programming is important? And one of the reasons is we are the majority and also disproportionately affected. So we are the majority, but we face challenges that are different compared to other generations. You can count the sexual reproductive health, you can count issues of unemployment and other issues, but we are excluded in decision-making platforms. So this time is very important for us to be on the table and discuss and bring issues and talk about some of the challenges that we are facing and see the possibility of addressing them. But again, we understand there's this concept of sustainable development goals where there's no leaving anyone behind. So as young people, we know who we are and what we face. And we have to also take stake into ensuring we address the challenges that we face. But again, it matters when we are part of the solution because we know the challenges that we are facing and we know the solutions to the challenges that we face. So youth should be treated as partners of development and not receivers of interventions. But we also know there's a challenge that we face. One is the information gap. We know most of the things, but these things are limited as well. So, despite the fact that we are the ones who are the majority in terms of the literacy rate, or they are mostly educated generation, but there are some challenges that we encounter, including digital literacy and other things related to that. But again, we understand we are the leaders of today. So if we make decisions of our state and the way we live today, then there's a possibility our tomorrow will be much better. So you've heard about the Global Lead Framework, and I won't talk much about it, but I'll go just straight to my reflections, where, according to me, there's a way that I'm looking at this framework and packaging it. If you look at it, it just gives you a straight line where you see, like, you start from the education, you go to a civic or political engagement and youth leadership and then youth organizing. But in reality, and based on my experience, I think for you to go through that process, you also need to consider some of the key things. One of them is mobilizing young people, because sometimes it's difficult for you to go and educate, or maybe for the young people to be found in a single specific area. So you have to consider mobilizing these young people before even going to looking at the programs that you can actually bring together to ensure that young people can also benefit from those. But again, as it has been outlined in the framework, there are some really important things that you need to consider. And one of them is ensuring you offer civic education, and that these young people are aware of their rights and responsibilities, because sometimes you can be aware of your rights, but you don't know what you should be doing to achieve your rights. So you have to really focus on that and ensure the young people are really aware of what is happening, what is entitled to them, what is the challenges that they face. But again, the issue of digital literacy, we understand there is a lot of growing opportunity. We are in a digital world now, but majority of the young people are not conversant, I can say. Maybe then sometimes it's a question of affordability, or the knowledge of seeing how you can navigate around those particular digital platforms, and you can also treat them as opportunities. So before you proceed further, you have to build that kind of understanding and ensure that young people have a very great knowledge, have developed knowledge and understanding of whatever is happening and actually the available opportunities within the digital platforms, and how they can also be able to move and build on those kind of platforms or opportunities offered by the digital technology or whatever into moving forward and driving the entire agenda. But again, one of the things that I actually want to insist is, because now we are talking about the issues of advocacy and probably driving accountability in the communities, it is very important also to think about other opportunities that young people think about, or maybe the issues, the challenges that they're facing. Because sometimes you might want them to really drive a certain agenda. It can be even the question of economic empowerment, or addressing the question of youth unemployment. But if they do not have anything in their pocket, if they cannot earn their own income, it will make it difficult for them to progress in the other stages. So you have also to consider these biggest challenges that faces young people, the question of unemployment, and how are you going to integrate it into the entire process that you're going to take. So, so that is also very important. But again, at early stages, when you come together, then you become very much stronger, and then you see how you can progress well. And, some individuals will also emerge from that particular group that you're coming from, but that does not really mean that you can go alone. So you're going together, it's something that can also ensure you are able to drive and go further into your whatever intervention that you're intending to do with young people. So as a designer, as someone who's thinking about implementing or doing something related to this global lead framework, you have to begin to think about those kind of issues at the early stages before you move further into the other stages, which will then emanate from the basis that you are going to focus on. But another thing that is very important, and actually based on my experience and most of the African contexts, is on building relationships with decision makers. You can be a young person, you can have a very good agenda that you want to drive, but if there's no trust between you and the decision makers, those who are serving in the current government, there's a possibility that you won't get support, and they might also become a roadblock to whatever you're thinking to do. So, from the early stages also, making sure that as you design a project, as you design an intervention, which is youth-led, and actually as a young person yourself, you have to ensure you find a position where you're going to build relationships. So from the stages where you're thinking about these ideas, what specific decision makers are you going to target? Ensure they're also involved in the process. They clearly and completely understand this stage, because at some point at the stage where you're going to focus on civic or political engagement, you're expecting to meet these people. It will be difficult for you to achieve that particular level, to actually pass that particular level, if at all you are going to only do it yourself. You're not going to build all these kind of necessary relationships with the decision makers. So that says, like, if you also work on those particular issues, then you are able to move into the right side of your program development process, and then you are able to climb the ladder to the point where now you're reaching the youth organizing. And while doing that, there are some of the activities that have been proposed in the framework. But in myself, I also need to, of course, they're really good activities, but we also need to focus on particular advocacy work. You have to be evidence-based. So how are you going to make sure you develop evidence, build the capacities of these young people to be able to get out there, collect data and evidence to support their agenda, the issue that they want to really focus on, and be able to ensure that they are able to drive and sit on the table with confidence with the decision makers and tell them, like, this is what exactly we mean when we are talking about the challenge, for instance, of youth accessing sexual reproductive health and rights. When we're talking about unfriendly policies that are affecting young people, this is what we mean, because young people our colleagues, our peers have told us this is the major problem that they face, and you have to really see the possibilities of addressing it. So building on youth-led action research is very important, so that you are able to generate evidence, so that it gives you more weight to sit on the table, to discuss, to have dialogues with the decision makers, and engage in the public and community dialogues at various levels. That is very, very important. That also builds your capacity as a young person. And of course, as you're thinking about that particular project or program, as an advocacy program or civic engagement program, then you will see these kind of particular early stages offer also learnings and education at the same time, when young people are looking for the possibilities to grow further. So some of the key takeaways from my presentation today is due to the political context, it requires building trust to excel in youth programming, as well as driving advocacy and accountability agenda. But again, emphasis on dialogues, because that also helps to build the culture of discussions. Before you think of addressing the challenges that you're facing, also look at the possibilities of you having that opportunity of demanding from your right side, but again, also look at how you can also build on your responsibility. And that enables you now to engage in meaningful dialogues and achieve whatever you want to achieve. But again, you have to take note, youth participation is not the only issue that matters to young people. So you have to consider other factors which may limit their effective and meaningful participation. And here, particularly looking at the question of youth livelihoods, ensuring they have something to build their confidence, they have something to take them free out of asking themselves, where am I going to eat? How am I going to buy another piece of cloth? That will limit them to engage in the program. and it will make you fail in implementing that project. But again, consider opportunities for building financial muscles. Of course, I've talked about it above there. It will enable them to move and motivates them to climb the ladder of participation and build their own understanding. But again, finalizing, I would like to say, based on the nature of the young people, this may not be a linear process, so it can go back and forth at some point. So it should not really tell you like you have to follow the steps as they are. Sometimes you might reach a point where youth are organizing, but again, it will also come back to where you also need to build their capacities and the understanding of those kind of things. So maybe I should end there and then leave it for a bit of discussion, and then I'll be happy to receive some of the questions and of course listen from yourselves as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oscar. So we have about 10 minutes if you have any questions or reflections, feel free to open your mic and ask, but also feel free to chat, to put it in the chat box so that we're able to capture as much reflections from different people. What is your reaction? Do you have any question to ask to Oscar? Do you have any contributions to make? Please feel free. Take your mic or type it in the box, and then we'll be following the discussions either way. Welcome, everybody.
I can pose a question. So my name is Anne and I'm with Plan International USA. You talked about forming networks and how it can, take wrong steps if missed. What are certain practical things you put in place to make sure that it actually grows and doesn't go into a misstep?
Okay, Farida, should I take the question or maybe we?
Yes, I think we can take, because I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. Everybody else, feel free to put it in the chat box, but Oscar, I think we can take the question and then.
Okay, fine. Thank you so much, my friend. So forming a network, if the steps are missed, one is you have to understand young people do not have homogeneous needs. As I said, they have different experiences, they have different backgrounds, they have different experiences, I can say in summary, like a young person who is in a major city or a young person who is in a rural community cannot really be merged together in a group or in a network and address the same particular issues within that level. So you have to, at the early stages of mobilizing these young people, you have to consider the diversity that forms the groups of young people, and actually consider issues of age, even, issues of age, for instance. So you can have a young person who is 15 years and then another young person in the same country with 30 years or 28 years. So how are you going to make sure that you are also able to understand their needs, expectations, and requirements from the beginning stages? So that is one, to understand the nature of the young people that you are engaging in your program, understand what their experiences are, what are their expectations, and actually what are the levels of understanding or knowledge on that particular issue that you want to address within that particular project. Even if it's a question of developing a toolkit to engage them in a project, then they also have to be on the table and understand what is going to happen in them, and actually make them also, ensure they also take part in meaningfully deciding what will matter to them. So understanding them is very important, because otherwise you will miss a step and it will be a challenge. Also, after understanding them, you also need to think about whether that particular issue that you're trying to address, with that advocacy issue that you're trying to address, is an appetite to everyone who is part of that youth network. Otherwise, it will end up being overridden by a single person or individual within that group, because that's their own interest. And they have power, they have knowledge, they have understanding. You know, it's difficult for them to allow others to pull them from the other side. It can be challenging. So having to, taking time to really learn and understand these young people from the initial stages, that assures you that you are able to now to move together into the next step. And this can be done by the young people themselves, understanding, mapping, and ensuring they are able to table the issues and move forward is interesting. So if you miss that particular point from the beginning, then there's a likelihood that you're going to miss some of the other steps going forward. And actually, some of them have been articulated in the framework as well.
Thank you. So we have 2 more questions. Oh, sorry, Anne. Just to make Oscar aware, there's 2 more questions. Anne, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was saying that. Thank you. That was all I was saying.
Okay.
So we have 2 more questions from Jupiter Jones. Can you expand a little bit more on how young people can get a seat at the table, especially in an environment where they are blocked by older adults who do not value their participation? And the next question is from Arafat. He's saying, or she's saying, that is it a must to have activism element towards advocacy interventions as to ensure youth meaningful engagement? What are your perspective on adultism thinking towards advocating of youth to have a role seat in policy changes?
Okay, thank you so much, Jupiter. How do you aim at a seat on the table, a seat at the table? As I said, the key component is to build that moment of trust where the decision makers also view young people as people who have contribution and people who understand the challenges that they face. That way, it means they will also welcome you. They will give an opportunity for you to speak. But again, how are you going to build that? Is by, first of all, ensuring you are mobilized. Because sometimes if you go alone, it makes it difficult for them to listen to you. They sometimes say like, that's your own problem. You have to grow up, young man, and those kind of things. But if you go together as a group, you have an agenda which you've researched very well, you have an evidence to support that, it makes it easy for them to agree and listen to you, because it matters to them. And actually, sometimes you talk to them and say, we're not trying to overthrow you, but again, we want to discuss together so that you clearly understand you have a responsibility to deliver our rights, and we have a responsibility to remind you and actually have this kind of conversation where we agree together to move forward. So building trust is a key component, and actually have evidence to support whatever agenda that you have also adds credibility into what you're discussing. But the second question of whether it's mandatory or necessary to have activism component or element in whatever work that you're doing as a young person. To me, I think the first question responds into this question, because sometimes activism is regarded as being rebellion or being resistant into whatever is happening, whatever decision makers have decided. The new young people are going to really challenge that and say that's not working for us. But again, if you build that moment of telling them, like, we know the problem that we are facing, we know the challenges that we are facing, this is the evidence to support whatever we are saying, and we have knowledge about it. So that by itself is an activism, but in a more passive way. And I understand for the countries like Tanzania and others, where the political space is a little bit unstable, it's very challenging to say you are an activist. So you can decide to build that moment of relationship and build that kind of passion to ensure you are able to move forward together as decision makers and young people. And I've seen examples of young people, including myself, growing into several positions because we've been able to discuss and offer solutions to the challenges that we have, but supported by evidence into whatever we are doing. So that's what I can say. But again,
Oscar, we only have 1 minute. Maybe you can take another one briefly, either from Musa or Colin. Which one you can answer within 1 minute, or will be removed from the room soon.
All right. Thanks for the discussion in room 1. Farida maybe would give us feedback on room 2, but would like us to get into a reflection mode, trying to look at now, from what I'm getting, most of you, it's your first time interacting with this framework or coming along it, but looking at what you've been able to discuss in the rooms and what's been presented, what is your reaction to the Global Lead Framework? Or how will you adjust your work based on what you've heard today about the framework? So I'd open it up for 2 or 3 comments or reactions on what is your reaction to the Global Lead Framework, or as a programmer, how would you look at adjusting your work based on what you've just heard today? Does that make sense? Does it not make sense? Yeah, I'd love to hear some reactions.
Let's try to get just 2 reactions before we move on.
I can jump in. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon from here. I'm Onyeka from Nigeria, Northeast Taraba State. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I've seen the Global Lead Framework earlier, but I've not been meticulous enough to go through it. But with this webinar and training, I think with what the policy advocate manager from Save the Children, I think I'll start using it right now, because I've seen as the founder of a youth organization in Nigeria, I've been having challenge in designing youth programs, activities, and how to streamline it to meet youth target the youths. But with what I've heard and the lessons I've gotten, I think it's a framework every youth organization should use to meet youths at where they are. Thank you.
Thanks, Onyenku. Thanks for that. One last reaction.
Maybe I can jump in as well. So I think my name is Arafat Lesheve, and I'm coming from Tanzania. So for my perspective from this Global Lead Framework, it's really very good, and it's also will help to enhance young people involvement on the process of the program. And my thought is that maybe most of the program or people who are doing a youth development program can really now see how to integrate or maybe how to engage young people meaningfully on the program designing process for the project that maybe are not started, but maybe for the project who are already started, there is a very this global framework also help to emphasize young people involvement on the by providing them a role into a project or into a monitoring and evaluation of the project side, and that also helps to maximize or to increase the level of engagement. As you can see on the health ladder, there is a high need of young people now to move from not only be at a corrective level, but also to come to be a meaningful youth-led engagement level, and that's also help. It's also captured the attention that we need to invest. Providing foundation training to offer positive youth development to youth programming specialists, or maybe organizations that are working to support young people in various sectors. Thank you.
Hey, Katie, so we have a question from CoP. They're asking, what is the relationship between Global Lead Framework and positive youth development? It's a good question, and let me share my screen just once so that we see. I've just pulled up the positive youth development framework. So if you see the positive youth development framework, it looks at the 4 areas for youth development. It looks at asset building, it looks at contribution of young people, it looks at agency of young people and the enabling environment. And when you look at the global lead framework, it kind of help you think how to incorporate all of this in a systematic way while you're looking at the different development stages for the young person. For example, when you are looking at the assets, it's about training, it's about, you know, the education bits. So that global lead has made a link to the assets, looking at the education, looking at practicing the skills when you look at the level where you're talking about political and civic engagement, but it's also looking at contribution of young people, especially once we get to the levels of youth collective, youth organizing. It's looking at enabling environment, especially when they're looking at the outcome, the final outcome, where young people are part of decision-making bodies. Really, once they're getting to that level, it means that the environment, the power sharing is really getting better. And then it's also look at the agency. When young people are ready to start organization and initiatives within the community, they're really exercising their agency. So there's a link in a way, but you could use both the things together while you're planning. I feel, in my perspective, the global lead framework helps you to plan, helps you to design. It gives you a tool where you can use to brainstorm ideas, but it's structured in a way that if you put intervention activities in every stage, you're able to kind of relate to the areas of positive youth development. That's my reflections, but we are willing to continue discussing in the forums and different places. And if other people have different ideas, you can put in the chat box for the benefit of the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Farida. I'll still take it back to you so that you can take us toward the last section in terms of the next steps. And thanks for your comment, Anne. Over to you, Farida. If you're speaking, you're on mute, sorry.
Unfortunately, yeah. All right, so we are inviting the different members of the community of practices to join us, and we have identified some different ways you can engage with us, and we're inviting you to be speakers and panelists of future events. We're inviting you to share expertise from your program. We can arrange small groups discussions in between webinars, but we can also use the forum that is always there. So joining discussion groups with other members to review literature, youth engagement, and attending or participating in the quarterly webinar. So there are different ways. These are just some suggestions, but we are open also to suggestions on how can we improve how we share knowledge, how we pollinate knowledge. And you can always contact us with the different emails. Okay, we will also put them in the chat box. But another good way to be part of our community of practice is in the next slide. So you can join by going to the Youth Power website, the youthpower.org, then click on the connect link and then scroll down to youth engagement and click that and follow the instructions to join this particular community of practice. Next slide, please. So the next slide is about upcoming events in the YP2LA, not only from the youth community of practice, but from other community of practices. So we're expecting a webinar on the 30th of March from Youth System Strengthening Community of Practice. On 20th of April, we're expecting a webinar for youth engagement in breaking gender stereotypes, and we're sharing an experience from Tunisia, and this is through the MENA community of practice. And then on the 21st of April, we have climate change and higher education. We're looking at education outcomes and the roles of the universities. This is at the higher education engagement transformation community of practice. And at the 28th, we'll be having localizing labor market assessment, process not product. And this will be under the business, entrepreneurship, and private sector engagement community of practice. So we are hoping for you to help us say, what do you want to see next? We have prepared, we will be sending out webinar materials, watch out, we'll be sending a poll as well for you to input in terms of what could be the next community of practice webinar topic that we cover here at the youth engagement one. And I can see Christabel has helpfully put a link in there. So we still have a couple of minutes. If anyone wants to share something, or Christabel, we are welcome, because we have like 5 minutes to before we end?
I think that was it from me, Farida. I've shared in links for if you want to join, to know more about the Youth Power 2 Learning and Evaluation community. You can sign up there. You'll be able to get updates about future events in the community, how you can participate as an individual or organization with the Youth Power 2 Learning and Evaluation community. Otherwise, to say thank you for joining the session today, hoping to connect in future events for the Youth Power Youth Engagement Community of Practice. Have a lovely evening, morning, and afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Learning experience. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.